The Batman has spent decades fighting criminals, some seeking power, some seeking revenge, and some simply just wanting to enjoy the chaos. But Arnold Wesker was different, because Arnold's greatest enemy was never the Batman. It was the voice sitting on his lap, a voice that mocked him, controlled him, humiliated him, and eventually consumed his life. To Gotham City, that voice had a name: Scarface, a wooden dummy that commanded criminal empires, a ruthless gangster trapped inside a puppet's body, or so it appeared. Because for nearly 20 years, Batman writers explored a far more disturbing possibility. What if Scarface was never the puppet at all? What if Scarface was the part of Arnold Wesker that Arnold himself feared the most? Arnold Wesker first appeared in 1988 in Detective Comics number 538, and his first story arc spanned 3 issues. At first glance, he seemed harmless, small, timid, almost invisible, the sort of person you might pass on the street without noticing. Yet the moment Scarface appeared, everything changed. That frightened man vanished. A crime boss emerged. Scarface barked orders, threatened gangsters, demanded loyalty, and spoke with the confidence of a mob kingpin. Everything Arnold Wesker lacked. Now, most Batman villains wore masks. The Joker hides behind comedy. Two-Face hides behind chance. The Penguin hides behind respectability. But Arnold, he hides behind Scarface. The dummy becomes a mask that allows him to express emotions he cannot express himself: anger, confidence, authority, violence. Scarface is everything Arnold believes he can never be, and that is what makes the character immediately tragic. Several years later, in Detective Comics, issues 659 through 664, writers began expanding the relationship between Arnold and Scarface, and a fascinating pattern emerges. Scarface doesn't simply command criminals, he dominates Arnold. He belittles him, mocks him, insults him, humiliates him, yet Arnold continues to obey. Scarface behaves less like a partner and more like an abuser, which raises an important question. Why would Arnold create a personality that hurts him? Because Scarface provides something Arnold desperately wants: power. Arnold feels powerless. Scarface is feared. Arnold feels insignificant. Scarface controls entire criminal organizations. The dummy becomes a fantasy, a version of Arnold capable of surviving a world that constantly overwhelms him. But every fantasy has a price. The stronger Scarface becomes, the weaker Arnold appears. Then, with Batman issues 588 through 590, in issue number 1 of Batman No Man's Land, Gotham itself suffers a psychological collapse. An earthquake devastates the city, the government abandons it, civil order disappears. The city fractures into territories controlled by criminals and vigilantes. For the first time, Gotham begins to resemble Arnold Wesker, broken, fragmented, struggling to hold itself together. No Man's Land becomes one of the most symbolic periods in all of Batman's history. The city loses its identity, just as Arnold has lost his. And in both cases, chaos rushes in to fill the void. And Scarface thrives in this new environment because fractured systems create opportunities for strong voices, even destructive ones. That is true for cities, and it is true for people. Scarface's voice becomes louder than ever during that period, and Arnold becomes weaker and more subservient than he ever had before. Then, in Batman Shadow of the Bat, issues 59 and 60, and Batman Scarface, a psychodrama, this question becomes the heart of Arnold's story. Not whether Batman can stop him, but whether Arnold can recover. Whether the man and a dummy can ever truly be separated. Arnold himself in the beginning muzzles Scarface, and while under the supervision of Dr. Arkham, Arnold engulfs the dummy in flames before walking away. In these issues, we get the fuller story of Scarface. Long ago, lightning struck an old gallows, one where 313 evil men lost their lives. The leftover wood was collected by a prisoner named Donegan, who carved the wood into a dummy for his amusement while incarcerated. His cellmate, Arnold Wesker, imprisoned for manslaughter for killing a man during a bar fight, admired the wooden dummy and began to talk to it, to adore it. And finally, the dummy took over. Donegan lost his temper when he found Wesker holding the piece of wood. He beat Wesker for the intrusion, swiping at him at first with a corkscrew. However, he missed and the corkscrew embedded it into the dummy's face, leaving a horrible gash in the wood. Wesker survived the beating, and then one night, as Donegan slept, the dummy talked to Wesker and convinced him to murder his unconscious cellmate to make it look like Donegan hung himself. This left Wesker able to use the escape tunnel Donegan had been digging for 15 years. And that night, Wesker left Blackgate Prison under the direction and command of his new ally, who told him that from now on, he was to be called Scarface. And of course, we learn more about Arnold Wesker as a child. He was timid, bullied, and one day his parents brought him to a zoo to see an albatross, and he was frightened and wanted to leave, begged his father to leave. And as they were walking across the street, an out-of-control truck, one carrying dummies and dolls, collided with the family, and Arnold Wesker, as a child, saw his parents die in front of his eyes. So now these stories move beyond crime fiction and into psychology. Scarface is no longer simply a villain, he becomes a symbol, a manifestation of fear, of shame, of anger, repressed memories of immense pain and shock. The exact diagnosis is never important. In fact, the ambiguity is intentional. Writers repeatedly refuse to tell readers what exactly Scarface is, and that uncertainty mirrors real life. Human beings are rarely simple. We contain contradictions. We contain conflicts, competing desires. Scarface externalizes those struggles. He turns an internal battle into something readers can visualize, can see. Then in Detective Comics 799, 804, 806, and 808, Arnold eventually dies. And surprisingly, this reveals the true heart of the character. For years, readers believed Scarface was the attraction, the gangster, the gimmick, the memorable visual. But Arnold's death exposes a deeper truth. The tragedy was never the dummy. The tragedy was always the man carrying it. Because Arnold spent his entire life searching for freedom. Freedom from his fear, freedom from his weakness, freedom from Scarface. And he never fully found it until the release from this mortal world finally gave it to him. However, in Blackest Night, death itself ceases to be permanent. The dead rise, old wounds reopen, and pain returns. And Arnold Wesker returns as well. For most characters, Blackest Night is a horror story. For Arnold Wesker, it is a metaphor. His entire life was defined by something he could not bury, a voice, a fear, a psychological wound. And even death cannot silence it. The symbolism is almost cruel. Arnold spends his life trying to escape Scarface, and even in death, he still cannot find full peace. And as we said, the Joker embraces madness, the Penguin embraces greed, Two-Face eventually embraces both sides of himself, but Arnold Wesker never embraces Scarface. He fears him, he resents him, he runs from him, and he cannot live without him. That is what makes the Ventriloquist one of Batman's most fascinating villains, because beneath the crimes and costumes lies a profoundly human struggle. The struggle between who we are and who we fear we might become. For Arnold Wesker, that struggle took the shape of a wooden dummy. And for the rest of us, it may look different, but the question remains the same. How do we silence the voices that tell us that we are weak, that we are afraid, and what happens when we begin to believe them? Thus ends our look back at the first appearance, origin story, and evolution of the Ventriloquist and Scarface. I hope you enjoyed that look back at pop culture and comic book history. I thank you for watching, and if you want more pop culture fun, click on the thumbnail at the end of the video for our look back at Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face, one of the Batman's most broken foes. You be glad you did. Until next time, remember I'm still your reluctant gringo from somewhere south of the border. Salud. And a huevo.